The Silent Killers. Last message. Everything is normal. I just moved into an old house on the edge of a quiet suburb. It's one of those places where the streets curve gently, lined with oak trees that sway just enough to let the sunlight scatter in patches across the pavement. The neighbors are polite, but distant, mostly older couples or families who keep to themselves. There's a stillness here that almost feels like the world has paused for a moment. The kind of stillness that lets you hear every breath, every creak in the floorboards, every whisper of wind against the window. At first, I thought this calm was exactly what I needed. A fresh start, a place to settle my restless mind. The house itself wasn't much to look at. It was older, sure, with chipped paint and a sagging porch, but it had character. A faded charm that pulled me in the moment I stepped through the door. I told myself that the creaks and groans were just the sounds of a house settling the usual noises that come with living in anything built more than 50 years ago. I spent my first few nights unpacking boxes, arranging furniture, and trying to make the space mine. The bedroom was small but cozy, with one window that looked out onto a narrow lane. Outside, the streetlights flickered softly, and the occasional distant bark of a dog reminded me I wasn't completely alone. I liked that it felt real. But there was something else, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. A whisper in the silence, a shadow just at the edge of my vision. Not frightening exactly, just off. You see, the previous tenant had left in a hurry. The landlord mentioned it casually over the phone when I called about the keys, but he never said why. Just that the tenant moved out without warning and left behind a few things: a dusty diary, some photographs, and a cracked old phone, the kind with a rotary dial that didn't work anymore. I found the diary tucked away beneath the floorboards in the living room. It was leather-bound, the edges worn, and the ink faded. I flipped through the pages, curious about who had lived here before me. At first, it was the usual stuff: daily life, thoughts, worries. But as I kept reading, the entries grew darker, more fragmented. The writer spoke of voices in the night, of someone watching from the shadows, of a feeling that they were being hunted. And then the last entry caught me completely off guard. It was dated just days before the tenant disappeared. The last line was chilling. They know him here. The silence is not empty. It's waiting. And it's angry. Beneath it, scrawled hastily, was my name. I couldn't understand why. Why would the tenant write my name in their final note? I chalked it up to paranoia. After all, whoever lived here last must have been struggling with something. I tried not to dwell on it. That first night, I felt the house settling around me, the usual creaks and sighs. But then I noticed something strange. The clock in the hallway, an old grandfather clock, struck 3 times, but the sound didn't echo as it should. It was hollow, distant, like it was coming from somewhere far away. The next morning, I found the diary moved from the spot where I'd left it on the kitchen table. Not far, just a few inches, but enough to make me question if I had been the one to move it. I told myself it was just me, tired and distracted. Then, late that afternoon, while I was unpacking in the bedroom, I heard a faint knock on the front door. I paused, listening. Knock, knock, knock. 3 quick taps. I wasn't expecting anyone, and when I looked through the peephole, there was no one there. The porch was empty, just the old rusted mailbox swaying gently in the breeze. I stepped outside, scanning the quiet street. Nothing. No footprints in the gravel, no sign of a visitor. Just the long shadow of the house stretching across the pavement. As the days passed, little things started to feel wrong. The lights would flicker briefly only when I was alone. I'd find objects, a glass, a book, placed slightly out of order. I told myself I was imagining it, that maybe I was just forgetful. But it wasn't just forgetfulness. It felt like a presence watching, waiting, lingering just out of sight. One night, I caught a glimpse of a shadow moving in the corner of my eye. I turned quickly, but nothing was there. The air grew cold, a chill that wasn't from the window being open. It felt like the house was breathing around me, slow, steady, deliberate. Then the phone rang. It was the old rotary phone the landlord said didn't work. My heart jumped as I picked up the receiver, expecting silence. But a voice spoke softly on the other end, low, calm, chilling in its clarity. "I'm still here." The line went dead. I didn't sleep that night. I thought about calling the police, telling someone what was happening. But what could I say? That the house was haunted by the memory of the last tenant. That a silent voice whispered my name from a broken phone. I was afraid they'd think I was losing my mind. So I kept quiet. I told myself it was just stress. Moving is hard. A new job, a new city, all normal reasons for feeling off. But deep down, I knew there was more. Because sometimes late at night, when the world outside has fallen silent, I hear the whisper again. Not from the phone this time, but close right behind me. "I'm still here." The days after that strange phone call felt heavier, like the air itself had thickened. I kept looking over my shoulder, feeling watched, even when I was alone in the house. The silence wasn't peaceful anymore. It was loaded, expectant, as if the walls were holding their breath. At first, I tried to rationalize everything. Maybe someone was playing a prank with the phone line. Maybe the diary was just a twisted work of fiction left by a disturbed tenant. But the subtle signs grew harder to ignore. One evening, around the same time as the previous nights, called just after 3 a.m., I heard footsteps pacing in the hallway outside my bedroom. Slow, deliberate, heavy enough to echo against the wooden floor. I froze, listening. The sound circled, coming closer, then fading away. I held my breath until the rhythm stopped, waiting for anything to follow. The next morning, I found the old diary again. It was open on the kitchen counter, but this time the last page was different. A new sentence written in the same shaky handwriting. "You don't see me yet, but I'm closer than you think." That sentence felt like a warning. I went to the local library to dig into the history of the house and its previous owners, hoping to find some clue. Anything that might explain the sense of dread creeping in around me. The librarian was an older woman with tired eyes who seemed reluctant to talk about the neighborhood's past. "There've been stories," she said quietly, "about the house and about the man who lived there before. They say he was a killer." I blinked. "A killer?" She nodded slowly. "Not just any killer. A man obsessed with silence. They say he took his victims quietly, never a sound. No one knew he was there until it was too late." I swallowed hard. The stories said he was caught only after a frantic last phone call. His own confession whispered into the receiver, chilling and strange. That call had terrified the entire town. But what caught my attention was what came next. The killer spoke of a force behind his crimes, something otherworldly, an entity he claimed had driven him. I asked if she knew more about this entity. She looked away, voice dropping lower. "Some say it was a curse, a shadow that possessed him, a silent voice that commanded him to kill." I left the library with a knot twisting inside my stomach. Back home, I started noticing other odd things. Objects moved, sometimes just a little, like a picture frame tilted when I was sure I'd left it straight. Books slid off shelves. Shadows shifted just beyond my sight. One night I found myself standing in front of the mirror in the bathroom, and for a moment I thought I saw someone else's reflection behind me. A flicker, a pale face staring back, eyes hollow and unblinking. When I spun around, there was nothing. The rational part of me screamed it was exhaustion, stress, paranoia. But my gut told me otherwise. The house was trying to communicate. I found myself drawn back to the diary over and over. I read the entries again, noticing a pattern. The killer's writings often mentioned a voice, soft but insistent, commanding yet patient. It spoke of silence as a force, a presence that demanded obedience. When the killer resisted, the voice grew angrier. When he obeyed, there was a brief calm. It was as if the silence itself was alive. One night, unable to sleep, I decided to test the theory. I sat in the living room and stayed completely quiet, listening for anything beyond the usual creaks. At exactly 3 a.m., the knocking started again at the front door. 3 sharp taps. I didn't move. Then the whisper returned, so faint I barely caught the words. "You hear it now." The knocking stopped, replaced by a slow, deliberate breathing, heavy and close. I was frozen, heart pounding so loud it drowned out everything else. And then the phone rang. The rotary phone. Again. I picked it up. A voice I didn't recognize spoke softly, chillingly. "You are part of this now." The line went dead. I dropped the receiver, hands shaking. I realized then that this wasn't just about the last tenant or the killer who once lived here. It was about me. Somehow I had become entangled in whatever silence haunted this place, and I wasn't sure I wanted to hear the next message. The nights grew darker after that. Not outside, no, the streetlights still flickered on time, and the moon sailed across the sky as always. But inside the house, a new kind of darkness settled. It wasn't just shadows. It was something heavier, something that pressed down on my chest and whispered to the edges of my mind. I started noticing rules, strange rules etched into the silence itself, as if the house or whatever lingered here was guiding me toward understanding or perhaps testing me. Rule 1. Never answer the phone after 3 a.m. The killer's last call had come at that hour, and every strange event seemed to revolve around it. That night, I broke this rule once, thinking I was strong enough to face the voice. The phone rang. I picked it up, and a cold breath hissed down the line. "Why do you resist?" Then the line went dead. After that, the house seemed to grow colder. The silence thickened until it almost screamed. Rule 2. Don't look in the mirror after 2 a.m. I learned this the hard way. One night, curiosity got the better of me. I glanced into the bathroom mirror just past 2. At first, all I saw was my tired face. But then, behind me, the reflection shifted. There was a pale figure standing silently, eyes empty, mouth sealed as if gagged. When I whipped around, no one was there. But the mirror still held the image. It lingered, faint but undeniable, until I blinked it away. Rule 3. Silence isn't empty, it's watching. The diary mentioned this several times. The killer wrote that the silence waited in corners, in the pauses between sounds. It could listen. It could punish. I began keeping a journal myself, writing down every strange event, every whisper, every movement in the house that I couldn't explain. I wanted to find a pattern, some way to understand what this presence wanted from me. One discovery shook me to my core. Buried in an old newspaper clipping tucked inside the diary, I found an article about the silent killer's crimes. The murders all took place in this very neighborhood decades ago. The victims were all strangled, no screams, no struggle, just silence. And the killer's last phone call, the one that led to his capture, was said to have been a confession. But there was something odd. The recording had static underneath the voice, and sometimes when played backwards, Strange phrases emerged. Phrases about a voice, a shadow, and an unbreakable silence that feeds on fear. I realized the killer wasn't just a man. He was a vessel for something ancient and cruel. The diary mentioned this too, almost in a whisper. The silence is a hunger. It needs to feed, and it chooses. I thought about the families of the victims, how they must still live with the fear, the unanswered questions, the cold absence left behind. And now that fear had found me, one night the presence made itself known in a way I couldn't ignore. I was in the living room writing in my journal when the lights flickered violently. The air grew icy. Then the radio, an old one I'd found in the attic, crackled to life, playing a distorted voice. It was the voice of the killer, I was sure, or something using his voice. Silence is not peace. Silence is a prison. The radio died with a pop. I dropped the pen and stood in the dark, listening to the house breathe around me. And then I heard it, a soft sobbing coming from the upstairs bedroom. But no one lived here but me. The sobbing didn't stop. It grew louder, more desperate, echoing through the empty halls like a forgotten plea. I tried to ignore it at first, telling myself it was just the window, my mind unraveling. But then I heard footsteps, slow dragging steps coming down the staircase. I grabbed my phone to call someone, anyone, but the line was dead. The old rotary phone sat silently on the kitchen counter, its cord tangled like a noose. My heart pounded harder than ever before. Something inside me told me to run, to escape this house, this presence. But as I turned toward the front door, it slammed shut on its own. The lock clicked. I was trapped. Desperation set in. I decided to confront whatever was here. I climbed the stairs toward the source of the sobbing. The air grew colder, frost forming on the walls. The sobbing turned to whispers. Then I saw it, the old bedroom at the end of the hall. The door cracked open just enough for a sliver of light to spill into the dark hallway. I stepped inside. The room was empty except for a single object on the floor. A doll, its porcelain face cracked and eyes missing. It sat upright, unnervingly still. I reached down to pick it up. The moment my fingers brushed the doll, a voice hissed in my ear, "Don't sleep when I'm awake." I stumbled backward, heart racing. Then the whisper swirled into a chorus, "You're the next." Suddenly the doll moved, crawling across the floor on its tiny broken limbs. I ran from the room, desperate to get out. As I passed the bathroom mirror, I glanced at my reflection and froze. Behind me the pale figure stood, mouth sewn shut, eyes hollow and accusing. I couldn't scream. I couldn't move. And then the phone rang. I picked up my hands, shaking. The voice was calm, chilling. You've listened to my last message. Now the silence is yours. The line went dead. I never left the house after that night. The silence settled around me like a shroud, and sometimes when the world is still, I hear the whisper again, soft, cruel, relentless. I'm still here. If you listen closely at night, maybe you will hear it too.